Hello, everybody. Welcome to Election History. My name is Dave, and I do videos about campaigns and elections. But this video has a totally different topic, and that is about AI-generated history content here on YouTube. Now, over the last few years, and particularly the last few months, you might have noticed a lot of AI-generated slop out there, that it's just absolutely horrible and inaccurate and incorrect. And for the most part, most people in the history genre have pushed back on it, whether it be you, the viewers of history content, or us, the creators. You have people like Sean Munger, who goes after AI, and then you have people like Chris at Vlogging Through History, who absolutely decimates videos regarding their inaccuracies. I mean, even down to the pictures that they use not even being a real depiction of who they're actually talking about. But in most of these videos, we can pretty much tell that they're AI generated. They just look and sound AI generated. It could be the voice, it could be the pictures, it could be using the wrong pictures, it can be all of the visuals and graphics that are used. We can usually tell. But what if you have a situation where you have a live person or you have somebody reading a script and doing a voiceover, but the script itself is actually AI generated? It's not researched whatsoever. Well, honestly, that's a double-edged sword, because if ChatGPT, for example, does it really, really good, they're able to write a good script, be factually accurate, provide sources and everything like that, then a lot of us in the history genre might be out of a job. But in most cases, it's extremely inaccurate, leading people in the wrong direction, and millions of people are watching these types of videos. Now, I'm doing research right now, just started a few days ago, on the 1932 presidential election between Herbert Hoover and Franklin Roosevelt. Now, this is one of the most consequential elections in American history, so I know that there's a lot of information that if I were to create something off of ChatGPT, that it could actually grab from and actually make a pretty accurate script of that election. So just as an experiment, I decided to use ChatGPT to try to create a 5,000 word script with factual, cited information about the 1932 election. So when I went through it, I asked it to look at the two conventions, the Democratic and Republican convention, and then told it to give me a great bit of detail when it comes to the actual campaign itself. So tell me about the campaign strategies, tell me about the topics, tell me about when certain speeches happen, and important events throughout the campaign. So I told it to be very, very accurate, but again, it should have a lot of information to get off the internet. So let's start off with conventions. I asked ChatGPT to write a 500-word continuous script about the Republican convention in 1932, and it actually spits out something regarding the 1932 GOP convention. So a lot of the versions that it had been giving me were just basically commentary, and I said focus more on facts, don't provide basic commentary that is common knowledge. So it then spit up a new version of it that was a lot more facts-based, but there was a problem. Down here, it says Vice President Charles Curtis was nominated without opposition. Curtis received 1,062 votes, reflecting unanimous support amongst the present delegates. But here's the problem. Vice President Charles Curtis wasn't unopposed. He very much was opposed. As a matter of fact, if we go to Wikipedia here, and I don't believe that we're using Wikipedia to actually correct the source, you can see that Curtis didn't have the easiest time at first. He eventually was unanimously picked, but he was not unanimously picked with 1,062 votes. He was unanimously picked with 1,154 votes. So we already have an incorrect stating of what happened at the Republican convention. Now, after I was done doing this with the Republican Party, I just simply asked ChatGPT to do the exact same thing for the Democratic Party, which it then, spit out a fact-focused, procedural 500-word script on the 1932 Democratic National Convention. So it went ahead and did that, and I start reading over it, and it just has a lot of factual information, or quote-unquote factual information. But I noticed here, roll call voting on the first ballot gave Roosevelt 666 votes, Smith 312, and Gardner 152. Now, I already knew that Al Smith had around 200 to 215. I knew he was in the low 200s, so this 312 is an actual misrepresentation. And if we go back to, I don't believe I'm saying this again, Wikipedia, we can see that Al Smith actually had 201 votes. And then there was a second ballot where he had 194 and then 190. Now, the 666 is somewhat accurate, but the Gardner number is absolutely inaccurate because it says 90, whereas the script that we have here says, where is it right here? 152. So this is more information that ChatGPT just goes ahead and spits up that's absolutely inaccurate. Now, after the Democratic and Republican conventions, I decided to dive a little further. One thing that I've always found interesting was the rivalry between Al Smith and Franklin Roosevelt, because both of them were governors of New York. And it was like, why did they dislike each other? What was the reason why? And I really need to delve into that more. But I was like, what is ChatGPT going to say about that? So I asked it to write 200 words about the rivalry between the two men. Now, this is what it says. Al Smith and Franklin D. Roosevelt had a long-standing rivalry leading into the 1932 Democratic primaries. The tension began during the 1928 presidential campaign when Roosevelt, then governor of New York, initially supported Smith's candidacy. But here's the problem. Franklin Roosevelt was not governor of New York in 1928. He was running for that election for governor in 1928, but the governor in 1928 was Al Smith. It was not Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt wouldn't become governor until 1929. And then when I tell ChatGPT Roosevelt was not governor in 1928, it says, oh, you're correct. Franklin Roosevelt was not governor in 1928. Now, here's the thing. If somebody is generating a pure AI script and don't know anything about the subject, they would have just ran with this without checking it whatsoever. Now, let's go on to the other things that I've noticed. So in the next part of the script, I wanted to have some information about some of the campaign stops that either Hoover or Roosevelt made, what they talked about, where they were, when they were, what dates, so on and so forth. And I wanted to do the early part of the election. So I said, give me a 300-word detailed description, continuous script about the presidential election between the end of June 1932 and August 31st, 1932. So I wanted to know what was happening in the campaigns. So ChatGPT spits out something and gives me something about June, July, and August. Now, we're coming down here to August of 1932, where it says here, Roosevelt's campaign gained momentum as he made appearances in key battleground states. In Detroit, Michigan, he addressed a crowd of auto workers, discussing labor rights and the need for fair wages. Now, it just says August, and it says that he went to other places and whatnot. But I wanted specific dates because I wanted to pull the newspaper.com file and actually provide that in my video. So I say here, provide specific dates for all the events mentioned in the text. Now, here it says August 3rd, 1932 in Detroit, Michigan. But here's the problem. I go to the Detroit Free Press and I don't see anything on August 3rd, 4th, 5th, or whatever that shows that FDR was even remotely near Detroit. As a matter of fact, I even looked at a list of his speeches that he gave, and again, do not see Detroit on there at all. So then I asked ChatGPT, can you provide me your source for the Detroit August 3rd date? In which ChatGPT responded, upon further review, I must correct my earlier statement. Franklin D. Roosevelt did not deliver a campaign speech to auto workers in Detroit on August 3rd, 1932. So again, if someone were to be using what was originally provided in the script, they would have been giving people wrong information. But it wasn't only this Detroit speech that was a problem. So then I asked ChatGPT to give me more dates of more events, more speeches and all that so I can go into the newspapers and try to pull those speeches and read about those. So here it actually gives me another speech on July 10th, 1932 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And unlike before, it actually gives me a source, which is the American Presidency Project. But if you click on the American Presidency Project, the only thing they have in 1932 in this file is the election of Roosevelt himself. Everything after that is 1933, and I don't think that you need to be a calendar expert to notice that July 10th, 1932 does not fall into this calendar of what they have here. And that's all this file is about. It's just about stuff that happened in his presidency, all the way down to his death and to his funeral. So This is an inaccurate source, but I also look at the Pittsburgh papers and see again, there's no mention of FDR giving a speech in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So then I asked ChatGPT, can you provide me the source for the July 10th date for Pittsburgh because the source you provide doesn't have that? And then it says, apologies for earlier confusion. Upon further research, I found that Franklin D. Roosevelt did not deliver a campaign speech in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on July 10th, 1932. The information provided earlier was incorrect. And again, as I mentioned before, if somebody is just purely doing a AI generated script, they would be giving people more wrong information. Now, when it came to the mistakes of the conventions and when FDR was governor and all that, I can maybe let those slide as being just sloppy searching and just giving me wrong results. But in both the Detroit and Pittsburgh situation, this was about ChatGPT literally creating history. They said a speech by FDR happened at this date, at this place, on this topic. This wasn't like, oh, we just got the information from wrong places. It actually is fabricating history. It is creating a false alternative history. And to me, this is way worse than just being actually incorrect. Now, after the Pittsburgh Detroit thing, I was just frustrated and fed up. And I'm like, you know what? Just give me a 200-word summary about Election Day 1932. Try to be as detailed as possible, which it gives me a little bit of a summary. And it actually recommends, if you like, I can provide a more granular breakdown of the results by region, Northeast, South, Midwest, West, or by county for key states. I'm like, yes, provide a granular breakdown by region. You can go over 200 words. And with that, it gives me county maps we can see here. It gives me the electoral map, and it actually breaks down the regions. But I want this in a continuous text. I want it in a script so that I can read it. So I say put, I accidentally typed but I meant put all that information in continuous text form with 300 words minimum, include fifth party system. So then it spits out something and it looks a little bit less than 300 words, but here it is. It's a comprehensive look at the election results and looking at the states and whatnot. So let's look at some of these results that it provides. It talks about Roosevelt and it says Roosevelt won states such as New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Maine. But there's a problem here. Pennsylvania was won by Hoover. It was not won by Roosevelt. And then further on, it says Roosevelt secured California, Colorado, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Washington, and Wyoming, while Hoover carried only Arizona. Well, no, Roosevelt carried Arizona. Like, you literally gave me up here an electoral map that actually shows Arizona for Roosevelt and Hoover winning Pennsylvania. So, like, what are you on about? What is this all about? It makes no sense. You actually provide yourself the information, and you're actually spitting it out wrong. Now, by this time, I'm getting extremely frustrated and extremely snippy, and I type in there, Hoover did not win Arizona and Roosevelt did not win Pennsylvania. Can you make this way more accurate? And it gives me the results. Now, at first, it does seem to get something right. It says, however, Pennsylvania remained a Republican stronghold with Hoover winning the states. All right, we got Pennsylvania right now. But what about Arizona? Well, not quite. Arizona was the only state in the West that Hoover won. So by this time, I am beyond frustrated. And I type in all caps, which I never do, Hoover did not win Arizona. And then it responds with electoral maps, which it's been showing me for a while now. I apologize for earlier inaccuracies. Upon reviewing the verified data, I can confirm that Franklin D. Roosevelt won the state of Arizona in the 1932 United States presidential election, not Herbert Hoover. Okay, you should have said that the first time. Now, that's all I'm going to say when it comes to the 1932 election, but I am actually doing some research on the 1952 and 1956 elections and wondering why Adlai Stevenson was chosen twice by the Democratic Party. I find it a very interesting subject, and it's something that's really, really hard to find documentation on and find books on, even peer-reviewed sources and whatnot. So I went ahead and asked ChatGPT, do some stuff about Adlai Stevenson. Why did the Democrats decide to run him in 1956, and provide sources as well? Now, it did provide this source, the first one on this list here, Adlai Stevenson and the World, The Politics of Ideas from 1972 by Robert Dallek. And I'm like, oh, great, Robert Dallek. He is a really, really popular, well-known historical writer about presidential elections. I was like, this is perfect. I can go ahead and use his book. I didn't know he wrote about Adlai Stevenson, but he did, it looks like, and that will give me a wealth of information. But then when I go to look for it on Google, I see that it is not a book written by Robert Dallek, but a book actually written by John Bartlow Martin, which I'm still going to look at because that probably will have a lot of information for what I want. But like even Google's AI picked up that what I put in the search about this was an actual mistake. So it's actually better than ChatGPT. Now, at the end of the day, I was just really, really shocked how many mistakes this ChatGPT script actually had. Now, those were the only ones I really kind of looked at a little bit and searched for. But my guess is if I would have meticulously gone through the script and what it provided, I would have found tons of mistakes. So these were just some of the ones that I'm like, oh, let me grab here, let me grab here, let me grab here. It didn't take me long. I mean, when it came to the speech dates and all that, I didn't know. I just went to newspaper.com and noticed there was no mention of them and asked again. I also looked at the file that talked about President Roosevelt's speech, or at least his campaign speeches as well, and just didn't see anything. So I was just totally surprised when it came to mistakes. But the worrying thing, and I think the bad thing about this, was how it just made up dates, places, and topics when it came to those speeches in Detroit and Pittsburgh. I mean, it totally fabricated history, which is just alternative history, alternative facts, right? They're not alternative facts are not facts, they're the alternative. And this is where we have to worry about AI and people possibly using AI for their scripts, because it's highly likely if they're using ChatGPT, it is not just incorrectly sourced, but it can be totally wrong. Well, I just wanted to do this video today to talk about this because finding the results of me doing this with 1932, I thought was absolutely hysterical, and I needed to share that. So I'll see you in the next real video, which will be about Paul Wellstone. That's coming out this weekend if you're watching this before I release the Wellstone video. So I will see you all later. Have a wonderful day wherever it is you are, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.